Well, it's very bittersweet. I mean, the record was about the death of Princess Diana, and I'd rather not be holding it. I'd rather her still be alive, and we wouldn't have to go through all this.
Sir Elton John, the legendary singer and dear friend of Princess Diana, is finally revealing the painful truth the world never saw coming. Elton has kept many of Diana's secrets, but now, decades later, he's opening up about what that ballroom moment really meant and how it shaped the rest of his life. Before we get to the shocking confession, we need to understand the man behind the music. Elton once admitted to spending over $40 million, 0 cents, in a span of 20 months. That included shopping sprees that involved buying art, luxury homes, designer clothes, and famously, flowers. He spent $300,000, 0 cents, a month just on fresh flowers. Some people thought it was excessive, but Elton explained it came from a place of reclaiming joy, something he lost for years during his struggles with addiction. He owned properties all over the world, but he also poured millions into philanthropy. He founded the Elton John AIDS Foundation in 1992, and since then, it has raised over $500 million, 0 cents, to fight the disease globally. Despite his lavish lifestyle, Elton never turned away from people in need. He's bailed out friends in trouble, donated anonymously to those facing medical crisis, and constantly used his platform to speak for the voiceless. But even with mansions, millions, and million-dollar floral arrangements, Elton's true legacy was shaped not by what he bought, but by who he cared for.
If you're successful, you have to give back, and that's my mantra when I got sober in 1990, and it's been my mantra ever since. And you know, the two go hand in hand. If you get great success, then you have to offer something back.
Long before he was Elton, he was just Reggie, a shy boy with a piano and a dream. His early career was a grind, playing in pubs, backing up other artists, and writing jingles. Everything changed when he partnered with lyricist Bernie Taupin in 1967. That partnership became the heartbeat of Elton's music. But even as success rolled in, Elton struggled privately. He didn't know how to handle the pressure of fame, the expectations, or his growing confusion around identity and attraction. In the 1970s, Elton was at the top of the charts, but offstage, he was lost. He used alcohol and drugs to cope. He later admitted he tried to take his own life more than once during that time. He lived in a world that celebrated his music, but wouldn't accept his truth. And that took a toll. And just like Princess Diana, Elton learned that living honestly in the spotlight comes at a cost. But that cost brought them together in a way few could understand. Elton's love story has been anything but simple. In 1970, he was engaged to a woman named Linda Woodrow. He called it off just weeks before the wedding. He later admitted he wasn't in love. He was afraid of being alone. In 1984, he married German sound engineer Renate Blauel. He genuinely cared for her, but he was hiding a big part of himself. 4 years later, they divorced. In 1988, Elton came out publicly as gay. It wasn't a flashy announcement. It was quiet, but honest. It changed everything. From that point on, he began rebuilding himself mentally, emotionally, spiritually. He entered recovery in 1990 and committed to living truthfully, and that led him to real love. In 1993, he met David Furnish. Their relationship built on trust and openness became his foundation. They entered into a civil partnership in 2005 and married in 2014. They now have 2 sons and live a life rooted in stability, something Elton craved for decades. Through it all, Elton never stopped being vulnerable. That's what made his connection to Princess Diana so real. He saw his struggles, he saw hers. They understood the pressure of being adored by millions while silently battling to stay sane and seen, and it was that same vulnerability that made his friendship with Princess Diana so powerful. 2 souls searching for truth behind royal curtains and red carpets.
What effect did the depression have on your marriage?
Well, it gave everybody a wonderful new label. It's Diana's unstable and Diana's mentally imbalanced. And unfortunately, that seems to have stuck on and off over the years.
Before the crown and the chaos, Diana was just a girl called Dutch. It was a nickname given to her by her family because of her ladylike manners. Even as a child, born Diana Frances Spencer in 1961, she grew up on the Sandringham estate, not far from the royal family. Her family was aristocratic, connected to the royals for generations, but that didn't mean her life was warm or easy. Her childhood was marked by instability. Her parents' marriage was troubled and eventually ended in a messy divorce. Diana was just 6 years old when her mother left. She stayed with her father, but the emotional distance was there. Her mother's absence left a deep scar, one that shaped Diana's craving for affection and approval throughout her life. Even though she lived in a grand house with staff and all the appearances of privilege, Diana often felt isolated. She didn't excel academically and was known more for her kindness and emotional intelligence than for her studies. She worked as a nanny and kindergarten assistant before becoming a princess, jobs she chose because she genuinely loved children and helping others. When she married Prince Charles at 20 years old, the world saw a fairy tale. But behind the scenes, Diana was stepping into a life filled with pressure, formality, and coldness. She went from being Dutch to Her Royal Highness, but that new title came with expectations that felt suffocating. She had to navigate royal duties, paparazzi, and a husband who was emotionally unavailable and still deeply connected to Camilla Parker Bowles. And when the palace doors opened, so did the pressure. It wouldn't be long before Diana would meet someone who truly saw her, someone like Elton. They met in royal ballrooms and backstage halls. But their friendship was never about fame. It was about comfort, kindness, and understanding in a world that often misunderstood them both. Diana and Elton became close in the 1980s. They shared laughs, attended events together, and were seen whispering and giggling when others weren't paying attention. But their bond went deeper than surface-level appearances. Elton understood Diana's pain. He'd lived with the weight of public scrutiny. He knew what it felt like to be expected to play a role while hiding your true self. Diana felt emotionally neglected in her marriage and constantly watched by the press. She could open up to Elton because he didn't judge her, he just listened. They shared a love of music, fashion, and philanthropy, but it was their emotional connection that kept them close. When Diana wanted to raise awareness for AIDS during a time when the stigma was strong, Elton was already deeply involved in the cause. They worked together to bring visibility and compassion to people affected by the illness, and they did it with sincerity, not for applause. Even during difficult periods, like when their friendship briefly fell apart after a disagreement involving Gianni Versace's memorial tribute, they found their way back to each other. That showed how real their bond was. It wasn't perfect, but it was genuine. But behind the smiles and charity events was a darker reality, one that Elton tried to ignore.
She was amazing because she was the first person of the royal family or someone that famous to go out into AIDS ward and touch people and hold them and hug them. And you know, at a time when people, oh, don't touch me, you might get AIDS. She was fearless in that respect, and she was fearless in anything she did, whether it came to landmines or to AIDS. She was genuine and so 150% behind the cause.
In his memoir and later interviews, Elton opened up about something that haunted him, Diana's final days. He revealed how isolated she felt, abandoned by the royal family, stalked by paparazzi, and misunderstood by the people around her. According to Elton, Diana often said she felt like she had no one she could fully trust. He said she called him during her darker moments, especially after her divorce from Prince Charles. She wanted peace, she wanted to feel safe, but the constant media intrusion and lack of support from the palace left her emotionally raw. One of the most powerful things Elton ever said was, "She was the loneliest person in the world." That stuck with him. He saw firsthand how kind, funny, and caring she was, but also how broken she felt behind closed doors. Elton shared that Diana's death in 1997 left him devastated, not just because she was a dear friend, but because he believed it didn't have to happen. The way the media hounded her, the silence from the people who should have protected her, it was all preventable. He sang Candle in the Wind at her funeral, written just for her, and it became a moment that touched the world. But for Elton, it wasn't just a performance. It was a goodbye he never wanted to say.
I'm not going to sing that song with those lyrics ever again. A, it would be too upsetting. B, it would stir up too many memories. And I think it's a one-off thing. It was a terrible tragedy that happened. and Bernie rewrote the lyrics to fit a memorial for Princess Diana. And I've done it once, and I think that's enough. And people will go out and buy the record as they have.
At Deanna's funeral, Elton sat beside the royal family, grief etched across his face. When he stood to sing Candle in the Wind, the world went silent. Originally written for Marilyn Monroe, the lyrics were rewritten to honor Deanna, his friend, his England's rose. Every word carried weight. It wasn't just a tribute, it was a release of everything he had held in. The pain, the loss, the frustration. He sang, "Goodbye, England's rose, may you ever grow in our hearts," and for millions watching, it became the defining moment of the ceremony. But for Elton, it was deeply personal. That performance wasn't about spectacle, it was about closure. It was the only way he knew how to honor her truth. The version of Diana the world didn't always get to see. The kind, wounded, brilliant woman he knew. The single went on to become the fastest seller of all time. But Elton never performed it again. Not in public. He said he only did it because the royal family asked him to, and because he knew it was what Diana would have wanted. One final moment of honesty in a world that had rarely given her that. After her death, Elton doubled down on his charity work. The Elton John AIDS Foundation expanded, and many of his efforts were linked to causes Diana had cared about: HIV awareness, children's health, and the dignity of those often ignored by the public eye. He made sure her spirit didn't disappear from the causes she championed, and even years later, in his memoir and interviews, Elton kept telling her story. Not to gain sympathy or attention, but because he felt the truth mattered. He didn't hold back about the way she was treated, he called out the media frenzy, he spoke about the coldness she faced. And he made sure the world remembered her, not as a tabloid figure, but as a human being who loved and hurt deeply. And though the candle blew out for Deanna, Elton kept her flame alive in every charity, every memory, and every truth he dared to tell. Elton John didn't just expose what happened to Diana, he exposed the cruelty of silence, the danger of appearances, and the power of speaking out. He reminded the world that behind the glamour and gold were real people, hurting, struggling, surviving. And by sharing his story, he honored hers. What do you think about Elton's confession? Was Diana failed by the system around her? Drop your thoughts in the comments.